Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. Ruth is a STEM coordinator who works to improve access to education at a large university in Ireland, and Claire is an associate professor at a primarily undergraduate university in Northern California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And today we are going to chat with Claire about her research cruise and find out how it went. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was great. I am teaching general chemistry this semester, which is not my normal class. So I feel like we're like week 5 right now as we're recording this, or maybe week 6, I can't remember. But anyway, we're in the swing of the semester. I'm grading the first exam. Lo and behold, the students did learn some things, but I'm also getting in the swing. I started with an exam that my colleague made for a Tuesday-Thursday class. My class is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which has shorter lecture periods, so I made the exam too long. So anyway, good things and bad things, but getting in the swing of Gen Chem and definitely enjoying teaching these students.
I think it's so indicative that you're like week 5 or 6, because that's exactly what happens around week 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And oh boy, have I done the using the hour and a half exam in an hour period with deeply frustrated students in response to that. So yes.
How was your week?
My week was great. So this period of time we are having our freshman orientation. But we do a separate orientation for students who are coming in through our program. And all of my colleagues told me, because to me I was like, oh, this is a lot and there's so much to do. And they were like, this is the really heartwarming stuff that fills up your tank for the whole year. And I was like, I don't know, you guys. And then it totally is. It's super, super, there's something just really infectious about these students starting out and they're just excited. And it's a big, massive positive thing. So
that's so awesome.
That was really, really cool. So I definitely, it's funny. I'm kind of the way there's just a rhythm to the year when you're professoring.
Yeah.
And this is a completely different, there is also a rhythm to this sort of job, but I'm just kind of experiencing everything for the first time. And yes, so it's definitely, I'm hoping it will be the first year when you're like, oh my God, there's a midterm, it has to happen next week. And you're like, oh, I didn't see this coming. And so I'm hoping next year I will be like, oh, this is coming. I can see this down the road and, all of that.
That's great. I'm sure you will get into the mode where you know the different things are coming.
Yes. Cool. So today I am super excited. I feel like this has been an episode in the making for a long time. So I'm super excited. And so, okay, I want to start with a couple of things. So one, Claire, what is your research area?
My research area is chemical oceanography, specifically trace metals, specifically iron and scandium. So we're looking at, the place where we did the research cruise was along the coasts of Oregon and California, and there's a really cool phenomena there where deep water comes up to the surface. It's called upwelling, and the deep water is cold, which is why it's cold to swim along all these coasts, particularly in the summer. But also the deep water brings a bunch of nutrients. Yeah, the summer is when the winds come from the north, and that's when the cold water comes up from depth.
Okay, that's mind-blowing. Sorry, yes.
Yes. And so the deep water brings a bunch of nutrients, sometimes not enough iron to go with it. That depends on a lot of factors, but a big one is the width of the continental shelf at the particular place where the upwelling is happening. And the nutrients lead to phytoplankton blooms, which goes up the food chain. And depending on, we went to a few different upwelling spots on this cruise, and we had totally different phytoplankton communities in the different spots, just based on probably the seed population of what happened to be there when the upwelling happened started growing. So we had a bunch of biologists who were looking at the biology side, and then a bunch of chemists who were looking at the chemistry side, and we were all there studying this same phenomena. So does that answer your question?
Yes, and I have many follow-up questions. One is a really basic question I've been meaning to ask you for years, which is when you describe your research area, the order of the words where you say chemical oceanography, is there is that just the accepted discipline, or is it because you're more focused on the chemistry? Could somebody else say oceanic chemistry, or you know what I mean? This is actually, I don't know if this is a question for the podcast. It seems like a personal.
Yeah, that's a good question. You can also say marine chemistry, like one of the big journals is marine chemistry. There's biogeochemistry, which kind of encompasses all. They all have slightly different flavors. My PhD advisor really understood the distinctions between all these categories. I kind of think of them kind of similarly. I like to say chemistry of the ocean, because when I say marine chemistry, it makes people think marine biology, because that's a thing we hear a lot about. So anyway, chemistry of the ocean is what I study.
Okay, and I just want to clarify here, when we say cruise, you are not playing volleyball on the deck and having like someone with a clipboard organizing you, correct?
Yes, so research cruise means we are at sea on a ship for some length of time, usually a couple weeks, doing research. Usually it's involving collecting seawater samples or something like that, making measurements at sea. Usually we get on the boat, and then whatever you have on the boat is what you have for however long the cruise is. And so that's a fun challenge of a lot of like fixing things with whatever you happen to have at sea, because that's your ship time, and what you have on the boat is what you have on the boat.
That's so awful to me. Like, it's so disturbing to me. But anyway.
Well, you know, this is so interesting because I have the opposite reaction, or it seemed like I did. Like, you and people who listen to this podcast in particularly last spring know that I was really nervous leading up to the cruise because of planning for all the things. I was trying to think of all the contingencies and make sure we had all the things for all the contingencies, and had I thought through every piece that we needed for every single thing, because once you're at sea, you're at sea. So I guess I was nervous about that. But the fun thing is that once you're at sea, that's all you have. You don't have to worry about all the contingencies anymore. It's now like, this is who we've got, this is what we have to work with, let's do the best we can and try to figure it out and help each other to make it all work. And that was really fun.
That's so interesting, because sometimes, like, I'm sure there was just so much creativity that comes out of that. And it's almost like, I was reading something the other day about certain writers who set themselves really arbitrary restrictions. Like, someone wrote a novel and never used the letter E or something, like whatever it is. And it's sort of funny because, like, this is just a natural constraint of the work that you're doing. But I'm sure it leads to really creative and amazing things. Okay, before we get there, I wanted to ask you about the cruise history, because this was, you were heavily impacted by COVID, right? So this has been a long lead-in time.
Yes,
for this
so
cruise.
The chief scientist, Adrian Marchetti, wrote a proposal for NSF to get 2 cruises funded, and they were going to be, you know, we'd do one in 2019, and then we were going to do one in 2021, and they were going to be, you know, 2 years apart, so we could go and do some stuff, same location, learn some stuff from the first cruise, revise for the second cruise, get a bunch of information. That was the plan. So we did the one in 2019, and I led a small team of chemists, and we were on a smaller ship. We still had, I don't know how many people we had, but we had a little group of biologists, a little group of chemists. We were at sea for 2 weeks, 2019. I took a student. It was awesome. We built a plastic bubble at sea, because for trace metals, you have to work in a place that doesn't contaminate for your samples. Like, a little tiny bit of metal will contaminate. There's a little bit of metal and dust, so you have to work in a clean, like, filtered air room, and so we built a plastic bubble at sea. Like, on the ship, we got painter's plastic and built it around some filters. So we got painter's plastic. You, like, build a room out of painter's plastic, and then you hang on the ceiling some filters that HEPA filter the air and push it into your room. We call it a bubble, but it's a room made of plastic, and the air gets filtered into there, and then you work inside that room in clean air. Anyway, that's what we did on the first cruise. Then, we were supposed to do, the second one was 2021, but it got delayed because of COVID, but there was actually a national mariner shortage that delayed us to 2022. And then in 2022, I probably mentioned this on the podcast back in then, we were like just a couple weeks out of going to the cruise. Like, if it had been a few days later, we would have shipped all our stuff. and then it got delayed another year. And because the upwelling only happens in the summer, we couldn't just delay it a few months. It had to be delayed a whole year. And that was another COVID mariner shortage situation. The first time might have just been COVID. The second time, I don't remember. But mariner shortage and COVID were the problem. So we had 2 delays. So in long time coming, 4 years after the first cruise, we got the second cruise.
Wow. Okay. And tell me the details of like how many days you were gone and then what was the number of people?
Okay. We were gone, I think it was May 27th to June 12th. So it was like 2 weeks was when we were at sea. There were 22 scientists and 20 crew, and it was on a boat, the RV Sally Ride, research vessel Sally Ride, which is 240 feet long. So this was a bigger group than we'd had on the 2019 cruise. It was awesome. I mean, again, we had like a bigger group of biologists and a bigger group of chemists, and we were able to just do more stuff synergistically looking at this upwelling phenomena.
Okay. So then, here's my question. So, like, when you're in there, do you have your own little bunk bed, or like, what's your cabin situation?
Yeah, you do. So you most of the cabins are 2-people cabins, and they're in bunk beds, and you have you have bunk beds, and they have curtains that you can pull across so that you can be sleeping and have your own little space, even if your roommate's walking around the room. There's one little desk in there. There's a little sink. Then each one of those rooms shares a bathroom with another room, and the little bathroom has a little toilet and a little shower, and you have to make sure like you lock the doors, like you go in there and you lock both doors, but then when you leave, you really need to remember to unlock your neighbor's door so that they can get into their bathroom, and that's always funny.
And is everything mini, like on an airplane?
Everything's tiny. Okay. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so tell me then, because my impression is that you've done this sort of thing before, but this time you were in a leadership role.
Yes, that's true. So I've been to sea a bunch of times.
That is the coolest thing anyone's ever, like, just, I don't know, you just sound like an old mariner who's like, I've been to sea, like, it's very cool. Okay, sorry, yes. How many times
so I did like a sea semester in undergrad for 6 weeks in the Pacific, which was awesome, and then for in-grad school, I did off the California coast for a couple weeks, and then I did the South Pacific for 8 weeks, which was hugely long, and then another cruise for a couple weeks in the California, and then as a faculty member, we did the first, these cruises are called popsicle cruises. That's just the name of the study. We're studying phytoplankton response to upwelling, cycling of nutrients, so they're called popsicle. So anyway, I think this is my 6th or 7th cruise, but this is the first time that I was co-chief scientist and in this leadership role. So in previous cruises, I've been in charge of doing iron analyses of samples, or I've been in charge of sampling water for people. But like this time, I was in charge of making sure that the cruise, along with Adrian, of making sure that the cruise could happen and that everybody got their science done and that we went. Like Adrian and I would get up. This was really fun. I really, really enjoyed this part. I was surprised too, because I was really nervous. It was amazing. So I was so nervous leading up to the cruise that I was going to forget one of these things that I was in charge of. Like, we need to think about how this block that holds up our water sampling system attaches to the A-frame. And I was like, gosh, I've never thought about this before. So I was nervous about all those things. But as soon as I got there, it was like Adrian and I were trying to help everybody do their science. And I was actually really amazed how much it felt like teaching. When I'm teaching in my teaching lab, I'm trying to help everybody there get good data. And, maybe something went wrong with their analysis and we're thinking about how we can solve it. And it really felt like that there where, people are trying to set up their equipment, and gosh, there's not enough flow rate on this system to do all the analyses, so what else could we do? Let's talk to the engineer and try a few things and see if that helps. It just felt very similar where I was trying to facilitate whatever problems were coming up. I was trying to facilitate solutions, and that didn't mean I had to necessarily come up with the solution, but I had to find somebody who could help or think about some suggestions, and I was just trying to help everybody get their data, which really just felt a lot like in the teaching lab. And then similarly, being the co-chief scientist, I felt like, how when you're teaching, I feel like it's my job to think about the atmosphere in the classroom and make sure it's a good atmosphere. And like if I'm talking with a student, it's my job to make it be a professional interaction and have it be a, come away positively. And I felt like that was also true there, where like, as the co-chief scientist, if I hear people being disgruntled, let me try to think about how to make them less disgruntled. If I, trying to keep the general atmosphere positive and friendly. How are you today? I don't know, like just going around and adding to the positive atmosphere. And so that also felt like teaching. And so that was really cool because I felt like previously on the podcast, we've talked about how teaching and research are so interrelated, and I feel like I will agree with that 100% kind of in a philosophical, theoretical way, but after that cruise, I was like, actually, I agree with it 100%, like actually practically. So that was kind of cool. I forget what you asked me, but those are some thoughts.
But so, okay, here's one question for you. So like when you're in the research lab, you are just clearly, you're the person in charge and you're the professor.
Yes.
Was it difficult to step into that role with what I presume, like maybe on the last cruise, they were your colleagues and then you were in this slightly different role? Was that difficult to do? And then a follow on to that is like, how much pastoral care was involved? Like when you're talking about the atmosphere and stuff, like how much did you have to be like, oh, like Joan really like needs to make sure she has her heart medication, or like, there is these things I need to be aware of, or anything like that?
Sure. I didn't have to do much of the pastoral care. Like, I think Adrian and I were officially people that if someone had a problem with anybody else on the ship, they could come talk to us as like officially that was one of our roles. It wasn't really, I think somebody said one time, oh, I was a little worried about so-and-so, and I just kind of went and chatted with so-and-so, and everything seemed fine. And that's all that really happened from that perspective. Food is all provided. Everybody knows when the meals are. The ship's crew makes the food. You just have to be there at the right time and place. Now we did a lot of like, if, people have to work at all kinds of crazy times of day and maybe they're missing a meal, and it's very normal at sea for anybody to go get a meal for somebody else who's missing the meal. So, So that's I suppose maybe falls into that category, but it wasn't really like my role as a leader where I would get somebody's meal, and it was more like just we're all in this together, and sometimes we're working through times when the meals are, and so I'll make a plate for so-and-so and put it in the fridge. I really didn't feel it. My leadership role to me felt more like it enabled me to do what I could to make the atmosphere to help make the science happen. It kind of felt enabling. It didn't feel like a separation, actually. Because we're all at sea together, we're all living together, we're all like right on top of each other. It felt more like you're with a bunch of colleagues that you know and are working with, and you happen to be the one who's chairing the meeting, and so you're like deciding that we're moving on to the next topic. But like other than that, we're all kind of in this together, Yeah. But it also felt like, all these students, a lot of these students, it was their first cruise, or at least it was an early cruise for them. So I was I was aware of that. That was a difference, was that they were excitedly doing one of their early cruises for their graduate program. So I was thinking about that.
Yeah. This is so cool. Okay, so tell me, like, if you had major lessons learned, like maybe things that went awry that you were like, yes, I wish this had happened this way, or the positives, because it sounds like it was overwhelmingly a positive experience.
It was. And I can't overstate how big of a transition it was from me being really nervous. Like, Ralph helped my student and me pack the U-Haul with all of our stuff, and my student and I got in the U-Haul and we drove up to Oregon, and we got to the hotel, and I was like still in my state of overwhelmed pre-cruise, scared. And then as soon as I started talking with these students from Adrian's group or from anybody's group who were excited about their new cruise, I was suddenly like transition mode. I suddenly felt like, okay, I'm trying to facilitate this cruise going well, and it suddenly was fun. And like halfway through the cruise, Adrian said something about how we were halfway through the cruise, and I felt disappointed that we'd already gotten through so much of the cruise. So I guess, and I guess another thing is, I had kind of thought of myself as, okay, I teach, I'm good at teaching, but I'm good at teaching. I'm good at research for somebody who does mostly teaching, was kind of how I felt. But then being at sea and being able to facilitate this, and I actually did feel like I was in my element. Like Adrian and I would get up in the middle of the night, usually. So the way it worked was, let me tell you a regular day, and then I'll tell you this thing that I was going to say, which is, for some biological science reason that I don't know, we needed to sample at dawn or before dawn for certain samples that had to do with the biological side. So they would do their first sampling at 5 in the morning, and then we wanted to sample everything else as close as possible. So they would get their water at 5, the trace metal people would get our water at 6, we would keep going through a bunch of stuff. So it was early kind of schedule. And once we got our water, there'd be a lot of filtering we had to do and processing and stuff like that. And then usually we'd do that through breakfast, and somebody would make us plates, and then we'd eat breakfast. Anyway, it was good. And then sometimes we'd have a science meeting at 7 p.m., it was so funny because that felt like so late. Like, I'm going to have to stay up till 7 p.m. for the science meeting. And then Adrian and I would get up at like 2 in the morning because we would have spent the time, since we finished at location A, where we'd been sampling that day, then we would start driving the ship around and using the ship's sensors to monitor where the cold upwelling water was, and also look at chlorophyll levels and stuff like that. So then in the middle of the night at like 2 in the morning, well, I guess at around dinner time, Adrian and I would decide, where do we want to take the ship tonight so that we can have a bunch of good data to decide where we want to sample tomorrow. So we would decide, like, around dinner time, we would have looked at satellite data and kind of decided, okay, based on satellite data, it looks like right here would be a good spot to sample. Let's go drive around right there with the ship and get some data from the ship's sensors. So we'd go talk to the captain, decide on a course for the evening. Then at 2 in the morning or so, Adrian and I would get up and look at the data from us going around where we had been and decide where we wanted to sample that morning at 5 in the morning, and then take the ship there. And anyway, this all sounds exhausting, but it was so fun. Like, every time I would get up at 2 in the morning, I'd be like, I'm just going to go downstairs and look at the data and decide on the point, and then I'll be back. And so I would go down in my PJs, planning, so sure that I was going to go back to bed. But then, like, we'd find the spot that we wanted to sample, and then I'd want to watch the data come in, and then it'd be 5 in the morning, and I'd be like, okay, I guess I'll go put on my clothes because we're going to sample at 6. Anyway, all this is to say that it turns out I really do like research too. And it was a lot of fun. And so I guess you said, what are some lessons? And it occurred to me, like, that Jen Sincero quote that I'm sure I've quoted before, of run towards fear. Fear hates it when you do that. And I felt like I was really scared, but then actually doing it, it was really fun. And I felt like I was actually in my element, and I was doing stuff that I was good at and prepared for, but I didn't realize that, like, in the preparation was so new, it didn't feel that way. But at sea, it felt that way. So I guess a lesson is to not be worried about things that seem scary, because they might be really cool.
That's so interesting. And I want to come back to the research thing and that, like,
yes.
Because I do think, and we never say it, but I do think that there is this weird hierarchy of the R1 and the teaching focused university, that, like, the reason why people are at a teaching focused university is because they're not going to be able to do the research load. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And it's so interesting to recognize, like, no, it's because you're doing so much teaching, and when you actually have the time that you're dedicating to the, you know what I mean, then it's like, yes, of course you're doing your research and it's great and you love it because you have the time. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, the reason why nobody can get a lot of research done during term time is just that they have a lot of teaching on. So I think that's super interesting. For some reason, all of this to me also sounds like a horror movie, but in a good way. But it's like you're totally describing Aliens, do you know what I mean? Or Jurassic Park, or like you have this team of, like, there's the biologist and the chemist, or, like, I don't know why it's completely like, or like that one that's set in Antarctica and it's like whatever. So I don't know why that's kind of cracking me up, but it just sounds so fun and so energizing and so
I felt that way.
Yeah, the camaraderie sounds amazing. It just sounds
and like... I think, like, that was a really awesome thing, is, like, some cruises are tons of work and just really draining. you know? And it can easily be that way. And I'm not saying that it was tons of fun necessarily for everybody, but that was like one of the things I was trying to do was make it a positive, fun cruise for everybody. You know, everybody's working really hard and up at all the hours doing lots of water filtering, but I wanted it to be like, oh, but we're in it together, and, you know, like that kind of thing. And that, I guess this is another thing that I felt similar with teaching was, I've told you before how I would say, you know, as a new teacher, if something comes up, I would say, well, what would a teacher who knows what she's doing do? What would a professor who knows what she's doing do? And I kind of felt that way at sea where, you know, something would come up where people are like, I don't know, some issue, and I'd be like, okay. I didn't actually consciously think this, but I'd be like, okay, well, I'm in the role of chief scientist, co-chief scientist, so I need to help make this work. So let me try to, it felt like, okay, this is part of my role. I better figure out what we can do. And it felt kind of empowering to just be in that role. Like, okay, I guess I need to do it. Anyway, I again jumped off from whatever you were talking about. Sorry.
No, that's so cool. And did you, like, how much of a mom did you have to be? Like, did you have to be like, okay, buddies, it's time to go to bed. You have to get up at 6 a.m. And
not at all. Like, they knew, everybody, I mean, it's a I feel like everybody understands the cost benefit analysis of sometimes you want to stay up late even though you know you're going to be sampling at 5, and that's fine. But no, everybody was there. I mean, like, it's you can always go, if something happens and someone's not where they need to be, you can send somebody to go wake them up, and that's fine. But that didn't really happen that much.
And do you have to be
that
like
I know
safety?
of? I mean, it might have happened somewhere else, huh?
Do you have to be like safety patrol? And like, or is everybody just really aware of like, we're on a boat, we're not going to have hijinks wrestling or something like?
Well, we definitely, I mean, we have safety talks. There's a marine technician who's one of the crew who's in charge of making sure that we all know how to be safe when we're deploying the stuff off the side, and he's always there every time we're deploying stuff off the side, and he's watching for, you know, safety things. And if something like so here's an example. I have to give a little side thing. On this cruise, instead of having a bubble that we built in the lab, I got my wonderful colleague loaned us a van, it's called, and it's a 20-foot container, and inside the 20-foot container is a lab that has filtered air, and all the trace metal people worked in there instead of building the bubble, which was great because it was really nice space, and it didn't take up room in the main lab with our bubble. Like, we all got to, you just put the 20-foot container on the deck, and then we all worked in there. The trace metal people did. And why was I saying this? Oh, yes, one time we noticed that it was kind of rocking, and so I just went to the person who was on watch. So there's the captain, and then there's the mates, and there's always one mate who's up there on the bridge at any time. So I asked them, hey, can you check on this? And then they sent someone down to see whether it was rocking too much, if it needed to be secured better. Turned out it was fine. But so that kind of thing, you the crew are the expert how do we be at sea things. The scientists are the expert how do we do science at sea things. And so we work together.
That's, yeah. Okay. What was my last thing? Yes. So, and I already know this story because we were just saying we have so many WhatsApp voice memos. Like, that will be the unreleased podcast someday, or like the secret podcast. But can you tell what happened when you guys all got back to land and went for a meal? Because
yes.
I think that's hilarious.
Yeah. So dock rock is a thing where you're used to the ship rocking, and then you get on the dock and you feel like the dock is rocking. And this time I got dock rock. Like, I think I've gotten dock rock before, but this was like intense dock rock. And other people must have felt it too, because we went to a restaurant for dinner the night we got off the cruise, and we were like, is this restaurant on a dock that is rocking? Because it really feels like it. And we actually like looked out the window and we're like, it's pretty close to the water. It might be. And then we were like, it probably is because it's really rocking. And we asked the waiter, and he was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. It is not on a dock.
I love the waiter's like, oh, no more wine for table 7. Like, nobody else can have anything.
Yeah, totally.
And how long does it take to go away?
Well, it took several days. The next morning, I had spent the night in a hotel room, which was not rocking either. And when I woke up, I hadn't opened my eyes, but I felt like it was rocking. I thought I was on the ship. I heard somebody talking, was like, okay, in that general direction is, Ben's dorm. Maybe that's Ben. And then I was like, oh, I'm not on. Then I thought, oh, no, Ben already left. It can't be Ben. And then I was like, I'm not even on the ship. It's just some rando outside the hotel room. But you just get used to not only the rocking, but the fact that this is the group of people that are around you.
Did you kind of collapse in a heap? Like when you finally got home and you were like, I don't have to get up at 2 a.m. and I can now sleep for like did it catch up with you?
Oh, good question. I don't really remember that. I mean, I was very excited to be home. You know, it's a long time to be gone completely. Yeah. So I was very excited to be home and with Ralph. But I'm sure I slept a lot, but I don't really remember. I mean, I think I was so energized and it was exciting to have done the cruise. It was kind of sad to leave all the people. You know, that's a group that we probably won't have that intense group together ever again, you know? And it was just, I don't know, it was just really energizing how things worked out. Like the 20-foot container, that was a really scary thing. Pre-cruise was organizing, like my wonderful colleague was loaning it to us for free, but I still had to, of course, figure out a way to transport it from her university in Washington to our cruise, which was in Oregon, and that requires a flatbed truck, and it requires a forklift, a heavy-duty one to lift it on, and I'd never done any of that before, and it kind of seemed really hard because when I was calling freight places, it didn't seem like this was something that they normally dealt with, was just a random, I need to move one 20-foot container one time. So anyway, it ended up being fine. Pilot Freight, totally recommend them. It all worked out fantastic. There was one little hiccup where when we were leaving, so this was after the cruise, there were 2 containers that had to be picked up. One was the Trace Metal Clean portable lab that I had commissioned the flatbed truck for, and then another container was a 10-foot container that had a bunch of trace metal sampling equipment, and that was going back to a different place. And so one flatbed truck arrived and picked up the wrong container, and I was at the U-Haul place picking up my U-Haul, and then when I came back, I saw the wrong flatbed truck with the wrong container, and I was like, oh no, but it was fine. I just talked to everybody and was like, hold on, forklift guy, can you please take this off? And, you know, and it all worked out just fine. But anyway, that was a moment of panic. But it was actually it was good. It ended up being a positive experience because there was almost a problem, but I solved it. There wasn't a problem. There could have been. I don't know. You know what I mean? It was like another example of actually this is doable, you know? And like, what would the worst case scenario be? The container would have started going off the wrong way. We would have realized it. We would have had to call the truck driver. He would have come back. It would have been okay. It was kind of another example of like, it's not an end of the world situation. These are doable things. Just like the flatbed truck was a doable thing. So it was scary at first, but it all turns out to be doable things. And that was really empowering to realize that. So I think when I got home, I was just so excited that everything turned out to be doable things and fun things, at least for me. I feel like in general, a lot of the people on the cruise had a good cruise and they felt like it was a fun, enjoyable cruise. I can't speak for everyone, of course, but from my perspective, it was fun, and I feel like a lot of people had a positive cruise experience. And so I don't remember collapsing into a heap, but I think it might have just been because I was so excited that it went well.
Yeah, I'm so struck by, like, kind of before the cruise, like, there's this illusion that, like, okay, if I just plan everything, then absolutely nothing will go wrong. And that's the goal, is to have everything go perfectly well. And it kind of reminds me of teaching when you start and you're like, okay, I'm going to plan every single minute of this class. But then eventually it just gets to the point where it's like, I'm confident I can figure it out if something goes, you know what I mean? And it just seems like, that just seems so empowering that you had that realization that, like, the goal is to line everything up. It's not necessarily to have everything go perfectly to plan. And the main thing is the confidence that, like, I'll figure it out if it does go.
Exactly.
Like, that's so cool.
Yeah. And like another example of things not going to plan and it being okay was we were originally planning, and Adrian had a backup plan and a backup plan to the backup plan to follow a water mass. Like, the water's going to upwell, we're going to sample it, and then we're going to deploy a drifter that's going to move along with the water. Like, we're going to put something over the side. It's just going to be carried along with the water, but it has a little thing that's going to tell us where it is, and we'll follow it. And so that was the plan, but the first drifter disappeared, stopped communicating with us. Oh, that's okay. I forget there was like a whole sequence of events. We like made contact again with the first drifter and then we lost it. But then we had a second drifter. Oh, but it was broken. Okay, we fixed it. We deployed it. Oh, but then we lost it. So anyway, we lost the second drifter, but it all worked out. We just changed the plan, and instead of following one water mass that was upwelling, we went to 3 different upwelling things, and now we got a more breadth instead of depth thing. So anyway, that's just another example of like, something comes up and you do what you can. And like you say, the confidence that if someone asks the question that you weren't expecting and you need to solve the problem on the fly, you'll be able to, and it'll be okay. And if you make a mistake on the board, that's okay. We'll figure it out. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like that confidence. Totally. I like that.
And there's so many things I don't engage with because I'm like, well, I can't do it properly. But like, yeah, I don't know. Everything you're describing sounds, apart from the being at sea, sounds so fun and energizing and just really, really cool. And
it was a lot of fun and energizing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
So tell me, what is in your cruise future? Is this
good question? I don't have any plans. Right now I'm going to, Adrian got another grant that I have some funding in it for, to analyze some samples from a cruise he's going to do in the Galapagos a little while from now. But I'm just planning to analyze those samples. I don't plan to go to sea. That's going to be during a semester, so I don't really want to leave.
But it's the Galapagos. Okay, but that's not.
But it is the Galapagos. I know.
Yes. But
yeah. So I guess before I went on this last cruise, I was kind of like, okay, well, I'll do this thing that I've committed to doing, and then I'm out of it because I hate cruises.
I know. He was like, I'll do it under duress.
And now after the cruise, I was like, oh no, cruises are fun. So yeah.
So this is really cool. Okay, so tell me, like, I love this. I'm glad it didn't turn into a horror movie and nobody turned out to be infected with alien, whatever. But like, how would you broaden this out to be like related to just the general professoring population?
Yeah.
Like me, who is never going to see, never. And even when you're describing the little bunk with the curtain, my claustrophobia is like going through the roof. But anyway, so how would you, like, what would be kind of the lessons you learned that would broadly apply?
Well, I think, I like the thing you were saying earlier about the teaching-focused faculty. You know, if you have a chunk of time to dedicate to research, you can do a big research thing, and I feel really empowered to have learned that.
Yes.
And I think that could probably apply to research faculty, too, in like something outside the general wheelhouse. If you have a bunch of chunk of time to do it, then of course you can do something that's outside of your current wheelhouse. So I think that's kind of what I'm taking away, is the empowerment of realizing that something that seems outside of what you know, or a stretch, or maybe not quite in your job description, but you want to do it, or whatever it is.
Oh, I love this.
If you get a chunk of time that you can dedicate to it, you can do it. You can learn whatever the thing is and make it happen, whether it's, I don't know. The example that comes to mind is writing a book, or pivoting to a different area. You also want to do this other kind of research that you haven't done before, but gosh, you don't know the basics. But if you have a chunk of time that you can dedicate to it, and that was really an awesome thing about the cruise, was just the focus was like, I am at sea. Like, there were times when I tried to work on this other paper that was also research, but I was like, this is just so different. Like, right now I'm in the mindset of this cruise, and I'm trying to make this cruise work as well as possible, and everything else, you know, that's what I'm working on. I'm not working on anything else. So taking a chunk of time to focus on something is great and makes a lot of progress, even if it's something that's outside of normal daily stuff.
That's so cool.
So that's my takeaway.
I love that. Yeah, it almost feels like a retreat, or like some kind of like
it's exactly
monastic like sort of like, That's so cool. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear about the cruise.
Thanks so much for asking. It was really fun to talk about.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.